This meeting is being recorded.
Yeah, we'll start. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to the very important session of Telangana Jana Vedika's 449th Sunday talk. And the topic today is Sri Lanka, economic crisis in Sri Lanka and its revival plan. For this important meeting, I welcome back Professor Prasad Rao, who was here on the 23rd of Jan. We discussed about World Trade Organization globalization. Today he's come here to talk up, give us some insights about the economic crisis in Sri Lanka. When we talk about economic crisis, everybody today is talking about only two things. One is Ukraine, Soviet Union, Russia war, and economic crisis in Sri Lanka. Of course, inflation is also there. But one thing, when we talk about economic crisis, it is a global impact. The economics in the globally, the economics of every country is in a very, very bad shape. Probably it is because of COVID pandemic or mismanagement of the respective national governments. When we talk about economic crisis, post World War II till the 1970s, late 1970s, the world was more a welfare state rather than a capitalist one or a populist. But as and when Reagan entered the scene, the whole scenario changed. And probably that was the reason, that was the time when populism has come into the forefront. Populism, vote bank politics, all these are dominating the whole world today, particularly in the South Asia, our region. So therefore, how countries are playing with the people's money and how it has to be revived. Sri Lanka is the best example. And before I don't want to talk much about this because it's a theoretical one and a more technical subject. I asked my colleague James Prashant to give an introduction and also introduce the speaker. Then the moderator, Dr. Arkota Srinivasan, will take over and request the speaker, Professor Prasad Rao, to speak. Thank you so much. James.
Thank you. Good evening. I welcome everyone for the 449th forum session of Telangana Jana Vedika. Our topic today is Sri Lankan economic crisis, a revival plan. There is a lot of discussion amongst academic circles about the Sri Lankan economic crisis, and it is without a doubt a good reason for this important debate to be happening. Among the causes, blame and responsibility to be apportioned for this monumental crisis. In a nutshell, we are reading about the huge buildup of the external debt, which was precipitated, among other reasons, due to concessions given to value added tax, which affected the fiscal deficit, which pushed the government to again borrow from abroad. Then COVID caused tourism to take a massive hit, which is a major foreign exchange earning sector. And even workers abroad chose to send foreign exchange home via unofficial routes due to falling rates. And of course, we have all heard about the famous policy decision to restrict import of chemical fertilizers, which in turn hit the output of crops and grains. The responsibility, of course, which everyone likes to pin, would be on the Rajapaksa government. Any simplistic analysis would derive this conclusion. But what do economists and academics have to say about the sad state of affairs in Sri Lanka, which at one point was a model welfare state in South Asia? And of course, many commentators have blamed its economic ties with China too. Now, Prabhat Patnaik prefers to call this a contingent crisis. And he says it is opposed to a structural crisis because it afflicts not the world economy as a whole, not even a large swathe of it, but particular countries that get caught in it at certain times. He adds, contingent crises are not accidental phenomena. They are intimately and organically linked to the neoliberal regime. They arise because there is no way of knowing beforehand how much borrowing is excessive until the crisis has struck. While many say that Rajapaksa government must take responsibility for the collapse, there is also a lot of disagreement on where exactly the fault lies. And here we need to have a quick look at the evolution of neoliberalism. According to Brenner and others, neoliberalism dates roughly to the 1970s, which have facilitated marketization and commodification while simultaneously intensifying the uneven development of regulatory forms across places, territories, and scales. Also, if you define neoliberalism as an ideology where all activities are commercialized, including politics, then we have a serious problem. The study of neoliberalism, capitalism, socialism is also deeply a philosophical one, as it addresses issues of poverty, income inequality, and human rights. It is also much useful to understand the interaction between four forces: ideology, politics, data, and sociology of knowledge. We know that the field of income inequality studies, the study of capital and the importance of capital income in income distribution, were expunged by global institutions for a long time. These fields of studies were again brought back into the limelight by Thomas Piketty. Since the welfare state addressed the subject of income inequality, perhaps it would be useful to compare our present age with that of the welfare state of the post-World War II years. A look at the main characteristics of the so-called golden age of post-war capitalism is needed. Why the welfare state was able to reduce inequality while guaranteeing economic growth, and how much of that has been undone under neoliberalism. One of the key characteristics of the welfare state is inequality seems to have reduced, and also high growth rates were maintained in the West European countries and the United States. Now, both of these phenomena are true because from 1945 until probably the end of 1970s, which are described as the golden years, these countries had rates of growth at about 4 to 5%. And this kind of growth had never happened in the past, along with significant reductions in inequality. But also, during these same times, these Western countries, along with other regions of the world, had major political upheavals, uprisings, etc. And we should be careful not to overemphasize this as a utopian period. To understand better the correlative between high growth and reduced income inequality, many countries after World War II had a process of catching up. Taking Germany as an example here, though capital was destroyed, skills were maintained. So they had the ability to organize production. It actually means that a massive amounts of human capital and labor were available and needed to be put to work and under the proper conditions, it had the effects of producing growth. Also, Branko Milanovic argues that the realization by capitalist class, or what people call the bourgeoisie or conservative bloc of parties, felt they really had to be very careful not to be overthrown out of power. There were strong political parties and organizations which worked alongside trade unions. And these were among the essential factors which enabled and rather forced the capitalist class to focus on the ideas of social democracy, welfarism, which academics seem to term as the golden years. Similar processes happened across Europe where there was a sort of a balance. Then, the 1973 oil crisis precipitated slow growth, which enabled leaders like Margaret Thatcher and Reagan, who wanted the state to unchain itself from welfarism for faster growth via the market economy or the market state. This was a hard turn towards neoliberalism. But how much has changed comparatively of the welfare state of those decades to the present times? Not much if you look at the data, but it has become less and less redistributive. Neoliberalism has not completely overturned the welfare state, as some believe, due to populist policies of various governments. But what has happened is the massive distribution of wealth into the hands of a few elite class, which is very well integrated into globalization, resulting in political polarization in global societies, which is again the result of unequal globalization and lack of interest by the elite in what is happening to the rest of the population. Milanovic adds that the underlying forces of globalization are so powerful that they can't simply be undone from one day to the next. As long as there is a huge difference in wages between the rich Western countries and those in Asia or Africa, the underlying forces of capitalism will always be on the side of globalization. And thus, neoliberalism has become the prevailing global system. When we study the attributes of a successful system, there should be a concordance between the needs of the system and values of the people inhabiting that system. But also at the personal level, you have to instill a value system that puts wealth acquisition at the top of the agenda, because it is only through wealth acquisition as a supreme value that one can become either a consumer or an investor or a worker, all towards the end of furthering the objectives of the system. We have always been told in media, etc., that liberal democratic political systems have always been capitalist systems. On this, one just needs to look at the data from 1815, where you have more number of non-democratic states which are capitalistic. And even in democratic countries, usually less than 10% of the population owns most of the wealth of a nation. It is essential to understand the global nature of neoliberal thinking. Milanovic says, after the end of World War II, the political possibility of a single world empire was fully negated, which would have enabled freedom of commerce and free movements of labor and capital, a thing which Pax Britannica in the last decades of the 19th century provided. Neoliberal's ideal world consisted of a double government, while national borders remained intact, and with them all the national symbolisms too, such as flags, religion, coat of arms, national language, newspapers, etc. But at the core level, there would be no national sovereignty in economic policy making. The world would remain flat for the movement of capital, labor, goods, and services. Capital will remain in a privileged position. It will be protected against nationalization to be abused by international rules. And capital will enjoy, to a large degree, extraterritoriality, as it did in the colonized or semi-colonized countries in Asia in the later part of the 19th century. With the rise of global institutions, the role of nation state, especially of the weaker nation states, became nil. They received their policy prescriptions straight from Washington-based international organizations, whether it be about budget deficits or the best way to organize social assistance, and then from the equally Washington-based and often State Department affiliated NGOs. The 1990s saw the global inequality reducing with the rise of Asian economies, in part ruled by Chinese and Indian economies, and other Asian countries. This period is relevant because the comparable situation to this is revolution and the American expansion. Economists have been discussing that more wealth will be generating from Asia. And in this context, despite being a small island nation, the Sri Lankan crisis becomes much more relevant due to the underlying structural issues which are global in nature. This is a highly complex topic having many layers and subfields. And only a specialist economist can help us navigate through this topic. We are highly pleased and thrilled to have Professor M. Prasad Rao with us back again to explain to us what is happening in Sri Lanka and how can the situation be revived. Professor M. Prasad Rao a couple of months ago gave us a master class narrative on WTO and globalization. And in some ways, we feel that this will be a continuation from that topic. Professor M. Prasad Rao, former head Department of Economics, Andhra University, Honorable Director, UGC Center, SARC Studies, Andhra University, former member of Academic Senate, Andhra University, former member of Finance and Committee and Executive Council of MIDS and AU. He's recipient of Lifetime Achievement Award from International Education Forum Australia. He is a development economist with 36 and a half years of experience in teaching, research, and administration. His research and teaching experience is in the wide range of economics. He has published 15 books and 50 research papers in national and international journals and has guided 13 PhD students. He is a recipient of Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan Award, Brightman Award, Man of the Decade 2019, Best Researcher and State Best Teacher Award from the Government of Andhra Pradesh. We are most honored and thrilled to have Professor M. Prasad Rao Garu in our midst again. And now, before I hand over the floor to our moderator, as per our tradition at TJV, I would like to read the preamble of our Constitution. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among the all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. In our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this Constitution. Now, I would like to hand over the floor to our moderator. Thank you. Professor Srinivas.
Yeah, thank you, James. Are you hearing me?
Yes, you're audible.
Thank you, James. Telangana Jana Vedika Zoom online meeting కు ఇచ్చేసినటువంటి ప్రొఫెసర్ ఎం ప్రసాద్ రావు గారికి మరియు ప్రొఫెసర్ సుదర్శన్ రావు గారికి ఇతర పెద్దలు అనేక మంది ప్రొఫెసర్లకు మరియు తెలంగాణ జనవేదిక సభ్యులకు అందరికీ కూడా స్వాగతం సుస్వాగతం. ఇంతకుముందే మిత్రుడు జేమ్స్ అనేకంగా ఈ టాపిక్ సంబంధించినటువంటి ఇంట్రడక్షన్ కూడా ఇచ్చాడు. నేను ఇస్తే మళ్ళీ రిపీట్ అవుతుంది. అందుకోసం నేను డైరెక్ట్గా శ్రీలంక ఆర్థిక సంక్షోభం పునరుద్ధరణ ప్రణాళిక అనేటటువంటి అంశం పైన కొత్త టాపిక్ ఇది. ఈ లేటెస్ట్ టాపిక్ గా కూడా మనం చూసుకోవచ్చు. ఎందుకంటే ఇవాళ శ్రీలంక దేశం లోపల వాయిస్ శ్రీలంక దేశం లోపల వాళ్ళ ఆర్థిక సంక్షోభం ఎదుర్కొంటున్నటువంటి విషయం మీకు అందరికీ. ముఖ్యంగా ఆర్థిక సంక్షోభం ఎందుకు వచ్చింది ఏంటి అంటే దానికంటే ముందుగా మనం చిన్న ఒక ఇంట్రడక్షన్ కనుక తీసుకుంటే ఇర్వింగ్ లూయి ఆర్విల్స్ అనేటువంటి ఒక తత్వవేత్త ప్రపంచ సమాజాలను 3 రకాలుగా విభజించడం అనేటువంటి జరిగింది. మొదటి ప్రపంచ దేశాలు ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో వాటిని క్యాపిటలిస్ట్ కంట్రీకి లేదా పెట్టుబడిదారు దేశాలు, అభివృద్ధి చెందిన దేశాలు మొదటి ప్రపంచ దేశాలుగా, వాటిని అమెరికా, జపాన్, జర్మనీ, ఫ్రాన్స్, ఇటలీ దేశాలుగా చెప్పడం అనేటువంటి జరిగింది. ఇక రెండో ప్రపంచ దేశాలుగా ఏదైతే కమ్యూనిస్టు పాలిత దేశాలు ఉన్నాయో అవి ఒకప్పటి రష్యా కావచ్చు, క్యూబా, ఈ దేశాలను ప్రపంచ దేశాలుగా మనము చెప్పడానికి అవకాశం. ఇక మూడో ప్రపంచ దేశాలు అంటే మనందరికీ తెలిసిందే, రెండో ప్రపంచ యుద్ధం తర్వాత స్వాతంత్రం పొందినటువంటి ఆసియా, ఆఫ్రికా, లాటిన్ అమెరికా ఖండాల్లోని ఏవైతే దేశాలు స్వతంత్రం పొందాయో ఆ దేశాలను మూడో ప్రపంచ దేశాలుగా మనం గుర్తిస్తాం. దాంట్లో భాగంగానే భారతదేశం కానీ, శ్రీలంక కానీ, పాకిస్తాన్ కావచ్చు, బంగ్లాదేశ్ కావచ్చు, ఈ దేశాలన్నీ కూడా థర్డ్ వరల్డ్ కంట్రీస్ గానే చెప్పుకుంటున్నాం. అందుకే ఆ మధ్య కాలం లోపల జోసెఫ్ స్టిగ్లిట్జ్ అనేటువంటి ఒక ఆర్థిక శాస్త్రవేత్త, ఆయన వరల్డ్ బ్యాంక్ కు అడ్వైజర్ గా కూడా పనిచేశారు. ఆయన ద లండన్ అనేటువంటి ఒక పేపర్ ఇంటర్వ్యూ చెప్తూ యొక్క ఏదైతే ప్రపంచ ఆర్థిక ఏదైతే సంస్థలు ఉన్నాయో, ఐఎంఎఫ్ కానీ, లేదా వరల్డ్ బ్యాంక్ కానీ, లేదా ఈ ప్రపంచీకరణ అంతా కూడా, ఈ గ్లోబలైజేషన్ అంతా కూడా మూడో ప్రపంచ దేశాల్లో ఉండేటువంటి సంపదనంతా కూడా కొల్లగొట్టేటువంటి ప్రయత్నాలు చేస్తున్నాయని చెప్పేసి చాలా స్పష్టంగా జోసెఫ్ స్టిగ్లిట్జ్ అనేటువంటి ఆయన చెప్పడం అనేటువంటిది జరిగింది. అందుకే నేనేమంటానంటే, ఈ యొక్క గ్లోబలైజేషన్, లిబరలైజేషన్, ప్రైవేటైజేషన్ ఆధారంగా చేసుకొని థర్డ్ వరల్డ్ కంట్రీస్ అన్నిటి యొక్క వాటి యొక్క ఆర్థిక విషయాల లోపల వెనుకబడిపోతున్నాయి. కేవలం ఆర్థిక క్రమశిక్షణ లేకుండా ఈ యొక్క దేశాలు ఈ విధంగా మారిపోతున్నాయి. కేవలం సంక్షేమ కార్యక్రమాల పేరుతోని ఇవన్నీ ఈ రకంగా వెనుకబడుతున్నాయని చెప్పేసి ఒక రకంగా చెప్పుకుంటూనే, జోసెఫ్ స్టిగ్లిట్జ్ తో పాటుగా, అందుకే ద గ్లోబల్ పిల్లేజ్ ఇన్ ద గ్లోబల్ విలేజ్ అంటే ప్రపంచ గ్రామం లోపల ప్రపంచ దోపిడీ ఇవాళ జరుగుతుంది. అందులో భాగంగానే ఇవాళ శ్రీలంకలో కూడా జరిగినటువంటి పరిణామాన్ని ఆ మాదిరిగా చూసుకోవడానికి అవకాశాలు ఉన్నాయేమో అని చెప్పేసి నేను అనుకుంటూ, శ్రీలంక ఆర్థిక సంక్షోభం పునరుద్ధరణ ప్రణాళిక అనేటువంటి అంశం పైన ప్రొఫెసర్ ప్రసాద్ రావు గారు ఆంధ్ర యూనివర్సిటీ లోపల వాళ్ళు హెడ్ ఆఫ్ ది డిపార్ట్మెంట్, కామర్స్ డిపార్ట్మెంట్ లో పనిచేస్తారు. అట్లాగే అకాడమిక్ డీన్ గాను, తర్వాత సెనెటాల్ మెంబర్ గాను పనిచేస్తారు, ఈసీ మెంబర్ గా పనిచేస్తారు. వారు సుమారుగా 37 సంవత్సరాల కాలం పాటు వారు టీచింగ్ ప్రొఫెషన్ లో ఉన్నారు. వారు 15 పుస్తకాలను, 50 రీసెర్చ్ ఆర్టికల్స్ కూడా నేషనల్ ఇంటర్నేషనల్ ఆర్టికల్స్ రాయడం జరిగింది. వారు ఆధ్వర్యం లోపల 13 మంది పిహెచ్డి స్కాలర్స్ కూడా పిహెచ్డి పట్టాను పొందారు. అదేవిధంగా బెస్ట్ టీచర్ అవార్డు కూడా వారు పొందడం అనేటువంటిది జరిగింది. వారు ఈ అంశం మీద, శ్రీలంక ఆర్థిక సంక్షోభం పునరుద్ధరణ ప్రణాళిక అనేటువంటి అంశం మీద మాట్లాడవలసిందిగా ప్రొఫెసర్ ఎం ప్రసాద్ రావు గారిని సాదరంగా ఆహ్వానిస్తున్నాను.
థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్ శ్రీనివాసులు గారు. డిస్టింగ్విష్డ్ డిగ్నిటరీస్, రెస్పెక్టెడ్ తక్కళ్లపల్లి రాము గారు, కన్వీనర్ తెలంగాణ జనవేదిక, శ్రీ మనోజ్ గారు, హైదరాబాద్ జనవేదిక, డాక్టర్ జేమ్స్ ప్రశాంత్ గారు, మెంబర్ సెక్రటరీ జనవేదిక, డాక్టర్ ఆకుతోట శ్రీనివాసులు గారు, moderator, other organizers of the Telangana Jana Vedika, most respected teacher, Professor I.D. Gupta ji from Lucknow University, other dignitaries, Professor R. Sudarshan Garu, former Vice Chancellor, and other dignitaries, scholars, students, distinguished participants, invitees, guests, ladies and gentlemen. A very good evening to you all. It is indeed an honor and proud privilege to participate in this prestigious lecture series and wonderful lecture series. I'm grateful to the organizers, particularly Ramu Garu, Manoj Garu and others organizers for inviting me to speak in the Telangana Jana Vedika. The topic chosen, especially Sri Lankan economic crisis, a revival plan, because the crisis erupts in the immediate neighboring country of ours is in distress. I just want to share some of my thoughts with the participants and galaxy of audience. And coming to the topic, we all know Sri Lanka is an island paradise in South Asia, formerly known as and officially declared the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. And it lies in the Indian Ocean, southwest of the Bay of Bengal and southeast of the Arabian Sea. It is separated from the Indian subcontinent by the Gulf of Mannar and the Pak Strait. And also Sri Lanka shares a maritime border with India and Maldives. Sri Jayawardhanepura Kotte is its legislative capital, and Colombo is its executive and judicial capital, and is its largest city and financial center. In Sri Lanka, ethnic groups consist of 75% Sinhalese and 11.2% Sri Lankan Tamils and 9.2% Sri Lankan Moors and 4.2% Indian Tamils and 0.4% others, including Burgers, Malays, Vedas, Chinese, and Indians. In Sri Lanka, people follow religion officially 70.2% Buddhism and 12.6% Hinduism, 9.7% Islamism, and 7.4% Christianity, and 0.1% others are non-official languages, Sinhala and Tamil. In Sri Lanka, government is a unitary semi-presidential republic. Sri Lanka attained independence 4th February 1948 after India attained independence in 1947 and became a republic on 22nd May 1972. And current constitution came into existence from 7th September 1978. If you look at the size of the economy, as per the estimates for the year 2021, GDP purchasing power parity and $306.997 billion. It was ranked 56th in the world. And the per capita income was $13,909, and it was ranked 88th in the world. And GDP nominal was $84.532 billion, and it was ranked 64th in the world. And the per capita income was 3,830 and 113th rank in the world. Human Development Index was 0.782. It's classified as a high and 72nd rank in the world. It is 120th largest country by area, covering 65,610 square kilometers and 25,330 square miles. Population as per 2020 estimates, 2 crores 21 lakhs 56,000, and the population density 337.7 people per square kilometer and 874 in square mile, 6 square miles. And today, Sri Lanka is a multinational state, home to diverse cultures and languages and ethnicities. The Sinhalese are the majority of the nation's population. The Tamils, who are a large majority group, have also played an influential role in the island's history. Other long established groups include the Moors, the Burgers, the Malays, the Chinese, and the indigenous Vedas. And the island has had a long history of engagement with the modern international groups. It is a founding member of the SAARC and a member of the United Nations and the Commonwealth of Nations, the G77, and the non-aligned movement. In 1977, the government initiated extensive liberalization of the economy. From the pro-market approach, Sri Lanka switched to a welfare-driven mode, and it invested in infrastructure. Sri Lanka also avoided forming close ties with India, and they choose to move closer to China. And if you look at the data in 2020, the share of agriculture in Sri Lanka's GDP was 8.36%. Industry contributed approximately 26.25%, and the service sector contributed about 59.67%. Sri Lanka is the highest ranked South Asian nation in the Human Development Index and was the second highest per capita income in South Asia. However, ongoing economic crisis has resulted in the collapse of the currency, rising inflation, and humanitarian crisis due to severe shortage of essentials. It has also led to an eruption of street protests, with citizens demanding that the president and the government step down. And if you look at the causes of economic crisis in Sri Lanka and its background, today it matters. It also bothers the entire world. Why is Sri Lanka suffering from crisis? We all know for decades, Sri Lanka has experienced ethnic tensions, mainly involving a separatist movement in the minority Tamil community and the north and east of the country. Since 1983, the conflict has become more intense. As we understand, when Sri Lanka emerged from a 26-year long civil war in 2009, and starting from 1983, its post-war GDP growth was reasonably high at 8 to 9% annually till 2012. However, its average GDP growth rate almost halved, almost cut in half. And after 2013, as global commodity prices fell, exports slowed down and imports rose. Sri Lanka is a classic twin deficits economy, said a 2019 Asian Development Working Paper. And twin deficits here, a budget shortfall and a current account deficit led to Sri Lankan's economic crisis. If you look at the real GDP growth, in 2014, it was 4.9%, 15, 4.8%, 16, 5%, 17, 5%, 18, 5%, 19, 5%. In 2020, it was 5.2%. And if you look at balance of payments in the exports in millions of US dollars, so 11,130 millions of US dollars, and imports say 19,417. It's a minus 8,217. Again in 15, minus 8,430 millions of US dollars, and in 16, minus 7,936, and in 17, 9,820 million US dollars, and 19, 11,693 millions of US dollars, and in 2020, in minus 26, I said, is equal to 12,515 millions of US dollars. That was the balance of payments portion. And also current account balance in percentage of GDP. In 14, minus 2.5. In 15, minus 2.5. In 16, minus 1.5. In 17, minus 2.8. In 18, minus 3.1. In 19, minus 3.3, and in 2020, minus 3.4. It's continuously current account balance in percentage of GDP is continuously rising. And one more thing is Sri Lanka's budget deficits were high during the war, and the global financial crisis of 2008 drained its foreign exchange reserves, which led to the country's borrowing a loan of 2.6 billion loan from the IMF in 2009. And it again approached the IMF in 2016 for another 1.5 billion US dollars loan. However, the conditionality of the IMF further deteriorated Sri Lanka's economic health. Questions are many. Why did Sri Lanka run out of dollars? Why do they have huge rupee and dollar debt? And why did the Sri Lanka continuously borrow? Even after default, why are they going behind the lenders and asking, and I'm not saying begging, more loans? And because this simple reason is that they're a nation of consumers, not a nation of producers. They're a population of more than 22 million, consuming more than generating, more than they're generating or producing. Obviously, if you spend more than you earn and you end up borrowing. Unlike India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, etc., in Sri Lanka, people live a normal life without starving, even if you don't do a productive job, because almost every basic need, they're, they're free or subsidized. If you are fed, why hunt? The crisis is said to have begun due to multiple compounding factors like tax cuts, some money creation, a nationwide policy to shift to organic or biological farming, and events such as the Eastern bombings in 2019 and the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. And both, I would say, both internal and external factors are responsible for the economic crisis in Sri Lanka, besides mismanagement of economy by the ruling classes. The most important striking cause of is massive increased foreign debt, done rapidly, and due to rise in government expenditures, the fiscal deficits exceed 10% in 2021, and due to the debt of GDP ratio rose from 94% in 19 to 119% in 2021. If you look at the figures, external debt, both public and private, and in billions of US dollars. In 2014, it was 43 billions of US dollars. In 2015, 44.8 billions of US dollars. 16, 45.9. 17, 49. 18, 53.4. 19, 58.4. And by 2020, it was 62.4 billions of US dollars. That was the external debt. And as a percentage of GDP, and 53.8%, 55.1% in 15, 16, 55.8%, and 17, 55.9%, and in 18, 56.3%, and in 19, 94%, and in 2020, it was 111%. As of February, the country was left with only 2.3 billion in its reserves, but faces debt payments of around $4 billion in 2022, including 1 billion international sovereign bond so, in July, maturing in July this year. Also, in ISBs make up the largest share of Sri Lanka's foreign debt, $12.55 billion, and with the Asian Development Bank, Japan, China, and among other major lenders. There is a trade deficit. There is also budget deficit. Colombo borrowed heavily from countries and agencies. And today, Sri Lanka's debt GDP ratio is 111%, meaning it owes more than it produces. That is the tragedy. And that led to distress. In a study conducted by the World Bank, a debt to GDP ratio that exceeds 77% for an extended period of time may result in an adverse impact on economic growth. That is exactly happening in case of Sri Lanka. In 2019, the Asian Development Bank flagged the problem of debt to GDP ratio, and it said the country's national expenditure exceeds its national income, and that its production of tradable goods and services is inadequate. The debt obligations have so far met with the use of import controls, adopted to save little amounts of dollars that the country has been earning, and use of foreign exchange reserves, which declined to about $1 billion. Import controls and the new exchange regulations, as well as resulting negative impact on production, all have contributed to domestic supply shortage and raising inflation. It is clear that all the measures are counterproductive, multiplying the domestic economic crisis as transmitted from the exchange crisis, foreign exchange crisis. That is exactly happened in the case of Sri Lanka. The problem worsened during the post couple of weeks due to fuel shortages and electricity cut down, further reducing the productive capacity of the country and causing further deterioration of investor confidence. That is very, very important for country's economy. Unfortunately, the Sri Lankan government lost it, and that is a deterioration of investor confidence. Coming to the another important economic cause for the economic crisis in Sri Lanka, election promises, tax reforms for the fall in the revenues. And we all know in Sri Lanka what happened in 2019 was also the year of Gotabaya Rajapaksa was campaigning for presidential elections. And the implementation of deep tax cuts, that is the major election promise by Rajapaksa during 2019. Election campaign enacted just before COVID-19 pandemic. We also witnessed all these developments. And among his election promises were deep tax cuts, series of drastic tax cuts, followed ratings, agencies raised an alarm, and they predicted that the country may soon run out of money. That is exactly happened in the case of Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka was downgraded to near default levels by these rating agencies. Thus, investors fled the country and said what we call the country of heaven that is gone. And another important cause for economic crisis is decline in tourism due to the pandemic. In 2020, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, followed by lockdown, the tourism industry of Sri Lanka, which accounts about 13% of the country's GDP. That's a huge, and I don't think anybody anybody without visiting Sri Lanka, say from the development nations, so nobody is left over. And that is the beauty of the Sri Lanka. And for about 13% of the country GDP got badly hit, and that led to huge foreign exchange crisis because no one was traveling to the island. And so pandemic is also one of the reasons behind current economic crisis of Sri Lanka. And tourists are also a source of foreign currency. In 2018, the number of tourist travels, tourist arrival were 2.3 million, but in 2020, it fell to 0.17 million. The revenue from tourism sector in 2019 was $7.5 billion, while in 2021, it was $2.8 billion. The Wuhan virus also hit remittances. Lankans abroad stopped sending money to the country. That was quite unfortunate, badly hitting the economy of the Sri Lanka. And so in late 2021, the revenue from tax had fallen. And agriculture production, which accounted for 8% of the GDP, had also fallen. That is a very, very misfortune happened in the Sri Lankan economy. Tourism revenue and remittances had also fallen. In March, Gotabaya Rajapaksa devalued the Sri Lankan rupee. The idea was to encourage remittances and qualify for a loan from the IMF. But as the Sri Lankan rupee plunged against the dollar, and the people's purchasing power took a plunge too. That is an unfortunate thing happened in the case of Sri Lankan economy, and it drastically reduces the purchasing power of people in the country. And today, $1 is equal to 354 Sri Lankan rupees. And another important reason for the economic crisis in Sri Lanka is runaway inflation and shortage of several essential, so like food, fuel, etc., lending the cost push inflation. And Sri Lanka has seen weeks of protests because of rising food prices and acute shortage of fuel. We have seen miles together, people stand, people queues for buying fuel in Sri Lanka. And for months, Sri Lanka has lacked the foreign currency to buy all its needs from abroad. And shortage of food and fuel have caused prices to soar. Inflation running at 30% now. Even today, hand-to-mouth situation is continuing in Sri Lanka. Food and fuel supplies run out. And the question before the government and before the public, food or fuel, and people want both, but government is unable to provide them. The Sri Lankan government is in a dilemma, what to purchase first. It's facing an acute shortage of both these essentials. It is relying on loans to stay afloat. The currency has fallen more than 32% since the beginning of this year. And prices have soared, and inflation is up to 30.2%, which means that the price of food has increased more than 30%. And 30% increase in price, essential commodities to buy fuel, vegetables, medicines, and food and other things. It is very, very difficult for a common man because poor people cannot wait such a long time. And also, a coconut that would previously cost 50 Lankan rupees in 2019, now it costs 91 rupees. Prices of onions have gone up from 80 rupees in 2019 and to 158 Lankan rupees for a kilo. And the price of rice has increased 93%. Chicken costs 55% more. Lentils 117%. So there is a soaring inflation. And this bothers a lot the common man and middle class people in the entire country. And in May, Sri Lanka foreign reserves dipped below $50 million. In 2021, total income was 1,500 billion Sri Lankan rupee, and the expenditure was 3,520 billion rupees. And Sri Lanka is in dire need of $20 billion. That's how much it would need for essential imports like food and fuel and restart exports. This is quite important. And another important cause for economic crisis in Sri Lanka is depleting foreign currency exchange reserves in Sri Lanka. And the Sri Lankan economy has been facing a crisis owing to a series of balance of payments problem. How the problem is acute, we have already discussed. Its foreign exchange reserves are depleting rapidly, and it is becoming increasingly difficult for the country to import essential consumption goods. Because of heavy imports and unable to pay essential exports, including fuel, and reserves plummeted 70% in 2 years' time. After artificially fixing the exchange rate in Sri Lanka for many years, since 2001 onwards, and it was quite good. And whether the sudden floating of rupee rate to dollar is a wise decision is altogether a different matter. However, because of this decision, the government took recently this floating of the rupee rate to dollar. Because of this decision, the dollar rate has jumped from say 203 to 328 rupees since the decision was taken on 9th March, just 3 months ago. In 2019, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka announced that Sri Lanka graduated to the middle income country status as per the World Bank classification of countries published in July 2019. In a year time, on the other hand, and the World Bank downgraded Sri Lanka to a lower middle income country, classified as a lower middle income country, considering the currency crisis and inflation. These are the two important reasons considered by the World Bank and declared a lower middle income country. And in July 2020, much to the disappointment to the government and economic bureaucrats, this is quite obvious. It is a not the happiest decision by the World Bank taken in view of the latest crisis in Sri Lanka. And as inaccurate classification, people call it. And it is the World Bank that classifies countries, you all know, as low income, or lower middle income, and upper middle income, and high income. And countries, whether those criteria are say, reasonable or accurate, that is immaterial. The following are the measures that they use, simply said, based on the per capita GDP. They, they take this criteria, based on this criteria, they classify the countries. And the most important criteria is a group GDP range per capita income. And that income, low income, 0 to 1,036 dollars, and low middle income is 1,036 to 4,545. Upper middle income 4,045 to 12,535 dollars, and high income about 12,535 dollars. And if you look at another important reason for the economic crisis in Sri Lanka, government policy. And this policy is banning of chemical fertilizers, which hampered agriculture production. Without thinking, without planning, without foresighting, all these developments suddenly happened in the Sri Lanka because of economic crisis. In order to encourage organic fertilizers, it is good. Nobody is denying it. But you need a plan, proper plan. If you don't have any proper plan, you want to follow, encourage organic fertilizers, you need a proper plan. In the year April 2021, and Sri Lankan government had banned the usage of all chemical fertilizers without proper thinking, and pesticides and fungicides. And it was a move by the government to push the agriculture sector towards organic farming. In fact, that decision turned out to be a disaster, and crop production of Sri Lanka and started declining and lending to fell critical food grains like rice by about 30 to 40, 50%. And that's why they're lacking of food grains. For the country imported rice first time in recent times in Sri Lanka. Agriculture productivity fell drastically, and especially in tea, which is a country's lifeline. And Sri Lanka produces 300 million kgs of tea annually, and out of it exports 97% of it, and this accounts for 50% of the total global trade of our orthodox tea. That is very, very important. And meanwhile, the tourism sector was badly damaged by the COVID-19 pandemic. In April 2021, the country banned all chemical fertilizers. It was a saving foreign reserves by banning import fertilizers. So that is another reason. So another reason for the recent economic crisis in Sri Lanka. Thus, the farm output reduced its production, fell by 50%. Around June 2021, Sri Lanka was forced to import rice. That was the drastic step left over to the Sri Lankan government. Furthermore, the prices of food went up because of food mafia people. And it is quite possible, and these mafias always ready to take the advantage, and started hoarding essential food items like rice, sugar, pulses, medicines for making money. So Even this government policy is also one of the reasons behind current economic crisis of Sri Lanka. And another factor, debilitating power cuts lasting up to 13 hours a day. This is a very, very unfortunate thing happened in Sri Lanka. As a result, industrial production also is declined. And this is an important, the industrial production and supply, thereby lending to reduced supply of goods and services. And so because of this reason, on one hand, agriculture sector affected. On the other hand, because of this reason, the manufacturing sector is also affected. As a result, if the both sectors in trouble, and how can you expect the goods and services and the economic activity missed, and it is unable to the country is taking the advantage of economic activity, combining the factors of land, labor, capital, organization to produce goods and services in the country. And at the same time, a fall of foreign workers' remittances to COVID. And particularly here, the war in Ukraine boosted oil import cost. And there is another, India also affected, and you all know the majority of the developing countries affected, and led to a further dip in tourism revenue. 30% of the tourists this year were from Russia, Ukraine, Poland, and Belarus. So they declined, they didn't visit Sri Lanka. As a result, they lost foreign exchange reserves. And that is another important cause. And what I want to say, all these internal and some of the external factors. And also I mentioned a couple of things, recent economic shocks. And the Easter Sunday bomb blast on 21st April 2019 in 3 churches and 3 luxury hotels in Colombo, resulting as more than 250 deaths and casualties due to Islamic extremism, dropped the number of tourists sharply. Who else can go and visit the Sri Lanka and under these circumstances? That's exactly happened in Sri Lanka. So foreigners afraid of going to Sri Lanka because of this drastic step, and also sharply affecting tourism sector, leading to a decline in foreign exchange reserves. And the country's lucrative tourism industry had gone. So, and foreign workers' remittances and shaped by as slapped by pandemic. That is another important. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 and the subsequent lockdowns made the bad situation worse, and the paralysis of world economy and movement of tourists affecting tourism sector. Exports of tea, rubber, spices, and garments suffered. Tourism arrivals and revenues fell further. And this is the worst situation ever faced by the Sri Lankan the last 70 years, since 1950 onwards. And it's quite unfortunate. It's a people call in South Asian economies, and this is the best economy. But unfortunately, it is ruined by in recent times. So we can say in a short period time, we have seen what is Sri Lanka. So people call it a paradise, and now look at the country. Say it is a desert. So this is the situation the Sri Lankan facing, and it is partly because of ruling classes also one of the responsible. And what to do? This is the $1 million question. So immediately Sri Lankans are supposed to feed 220 there's 22 million people. So by 7 o'clock, they're supposed to eat their dinner. And, the country economy is able to provide food in the short time. It is very difficult. And some of the revival plans we can think about it for Sri Lankan government. The government should take measures for economic recovery of the country as the shortage of certain essential commodities ends. The commodities, if you day spends and the commodities run out. So this is the situation. It is expected immediately because all commodities are ended, and then there is nothing to eat. There's nothing to consume. This is the situation in Sri Lanka. Everywhere, long queues for essential commodities, even milk, medicines, vegetables, meat, even for bread, rice, everything. And it is expected immediately because all commodities are ended. And uh, poor people, overnight they're becoming the paupers. That is the unfortunate situation happened. And these poor people cannot wait such a long time. And something must happen. Some miracle must happen in Sri Lanka, and then only the people can survive. And most important revival thing about agriculture sector. As you know, manure policy is already rolled back, and the chemical fertilizers is permitted now. That is good thing. And if they want to go for as a um, um, without fertilizers, pesticides, and they can go for it. But it will take, they have to plan for it first and then implement it. And this needs to be confined, and productivity of agriculture to be improved by use of technology and giving subsidies and credit facilities. There's no doubt about it. And the government is doing the same thing now. That is a one important measure government should think about it. And at the same time, the other important measure we can think about in the present circumstances, non-farm jobs need to be created in the form of resorts and tourism expansion instead of relying more on agriculture for employment. Agriculture generation employment is unable to generate some many jobs in the agriculture sectors. But what is the alternative? Alternative in the short, in the in the in the near long run. So the only left out thing is say encouraging non-farm employment, and that is very important. And the link between the agriculture and the non-farm sector at the moment is weak, and the government is supposed to strengthen it so that so that it can create employment opportunities in non-farm sector, particularly related to tourism sectors and other important sectors. And another important measure we would like to think about it, it would be best to raise domestic tax revenues. The government unable to say mobilize tax revenues so far. So because of tax reforms, because of tax cuts in the past, particularly after 2019, Rajapaksa came into power, and what he promised to the people in the elections implemented immediately at the time of COVID-19 as a pandemic. And that's why the most important aspect of the Sri Lankan government is supposed to think to raise domestic tax revenue. And immediate thing, immediate um, way of dealing things is shrinking government expenditure to limit borrowing. That is very, very important. That's a, I'm not saying don't go for borrowing. It's a borrowing already, so you made extensively, and there's no point in going for borrowing and and so to limit borrowing. That's what we want to say, and particularly sovereign borrowing from external sources. And another important measure we are supposed to think, uh, tough measures should be taken up, restructuring the administration of concessions and subsidies. Government already exceeded its limits in the case of concessions and offering subsidies to the people in different walks of life in the country. And now it is time to think about it for restructuring of administration of concessions and subsidies. And at the same time, the government should also join hands with the Tamil political leadership to create a roadmap that is very, very important. The government is unable to, I'm not saying that, but it seems the government is unable to, what we call as to create a roadmap. This is very, very important for the economic development of the war affected northern and eastern provinces, and among the areas badly hit by the current crisis. The poor people are staying in these two important provinces, and that's why this is a very important decision one has to think about it. And also, political leadership already changed is a good step towards addressing grievances of the people. And you know, was already a new administration came into existence, and again that introducing its budget in the parliament in the coming months, and this will lead to diversification of Sri Lankan economy with democratic values. This is very, very important, not um, autocratic measures. It is democratic measures solve the problems, and better implementation of reforms, and particularly productivity of labor needs to be improved by providing technical training and amending labor laws appropriately. Wherever labor laws are stringent, and we have to liberalize these labor laws and involving the people in economic activity, and so their productivity levels should be improved at the moment. And also public distribution system to be strengthened. So it seems very ugly in the present setup in public distribution system, and that's why it should be strengthened, it should be changed, and it should be as a more practical. And at the same time, state funded education to be encouraged, which will help by increasing the skill to better industries and better industrialized agriculture and tourism sectors. So they're the core sectors, and we have to concentrate in those core sectors to reap wonderful results from those important sectors. And at the same time, to accomplish a near universal electricity and fuel supply. Immediately, the government is supposed to think about it, how to bring bring it supply chains, how to strengthen the supply chains in the case of electricity and fuel supply. And there, government has to spend much, whatever left over, it is better to spend on that. And most interesting aspect, the fiscal and monetary policies need to be tackled and a little bit to suit the macroeconomic factors as the need of the hour. This is very, very important. As, the administration is failed only in the case of tackling of these two important policies. Governments and government particularly failed, and the ruling class particularly failed in tackling these important policies, and that's why has a little bit suit to the macroeconomic factors as the need of the hour. And appropriate fiscal policy will help reducing the revenue deficit. So huge revenue deficits doesn't help. But for the last um, uh, many years, starting 2012 onwards, if you look at the budgets and revenue deficits are huge, and the appropriate fiscal policies will help reducing the revenue deficits, and appropriate monetary policies will availability of liquidity in the economy, leading to investments in desired sectors. Liquidity is important, but people don't have any liquidity. Without liquidity, how can they spend? How can the economy grow? And how can they increase commodities? And how can they concentrate on growing and growth? All these things are. That's why it is very, very important. And at the same time, to correct foreign exchange deficits, and how foreign exchange is keep on deficit it for the many years, and firefighting measures like import restrictions needs to be improved and exports to be diversified to strike a balance between these two, and international coordination is a must. And unfortunately, this coordination is missing, and this is very soon the government is able to recognize this factor and think about it and start international coordination, and particularly diversify to strike a balance between these two. And at the same time, since COVID-19 pandemic has gone, the tourism sector needs to be made more attractive, since tourism in Sri Lanka is the mainstay of the economy. So measures the beauty of the economy in Sri Lanka is so only one sector, that is a tourism sector. It contributes more than 13%. And as a result, COVID affected, and as a result, tourism affected. As a result, nobody visiting country, and we are missing international pounds and dollars, and that's why unable to repay debts and imports. And particularly, India is helping. We have to appreciate the India's role here. And India must offer Sri Lanka financial help. Definitely, it's doing well, and whatever help it required, India is supposed to, um, from India's assistance side, it must go. And policy advice, this is very, very important. And we have wonderful policy makers in this country. And it says, even if it is a small country, it's with 22 million population, and people are here to advise properly. And investment from Indian enterprises. Indian enterprises are known internationally for their wonderful talents in terms of investing, entrepreneurship. And this is we are supposed to take the advantage here and help the country in a way, and at the same time say develop good relations with Sri Lanka. And at the same time, in the interim, Rajapaksa has also sought help from China and India. That's good, and particularly assistance on fuel from India. So India helped in this regard. A diesel shipment under $500 million credit is a line signed with the India in February, and also Sri Lanka and India have signed 1 billion credit line for importing essential, including food and medicines. And the government sought to at least another 1 billion from India. And these developments are going, negotiations are going, and whatever India is supposed to help in a humanitarian grounds, and it is doing best. And what I want to conclude under these important, under the background of these important developments, since telecom sector is already producing 32% more than before pandemic, and as a, that is a good sign for the economy in Sri Lanka. And at the same time, IT sector expanded by 20%, and the financial services sector rose by 28%. And these are all good signs for the Sri Lankan economy. And definitely, the country is supposed to take advantage, and there is every chance for quick recovery in Sri Lankan economy. No need to worry, no need to bother. Let bygones be bygones, but we have to think properly, stably, and take decisions effectively and implement them properly. And this is the need of the hour from the economy point of view. At the same time, must implement more productive, focused economic policies and not consumer-based policies. How long we can stick on to the same productive levels? And so we are supposed to take decisions. So productivity levels are important. Look at the developing nations. So how they are growing. It's their productivity levels are improving day by day, every time. And this is the logic they are showing to the rest of the world, and we have to take care of these essential things as well, and look at the surrounding neighboring countries and learn things. And we have to learn from the past experiences, and this is very important, and concentrate on more productive, focused economic policies. And it is quite unfortunate that this collapse and the worst thing is the worst thing. So, we didn't expect, we never anticipated such a drastic thing happened in Sri Lanka. Did anybody ever expected? No, not at all. But it's happened quite unfortunately. It happens everywhere, anywhere. And I'm not saying it happens everywhere, but it happens anywhere, because we must be very cautious. It is quite unfortunate that collapse is the worst thing that happened during our lifetimes. And people need to wake up themselves, their attitudes, and the society. Society is important, country is important, and say nations build, people's sacrifice. Sacrifice is important, but unfortunately, say, we're all missing these things, and we have a strong feeling that there will be a never chance like this again. I'm sure, I'm quite confident that this will never happen, and definitely Sri Lankans will learn from the past experience, and the world is ready to help to the extent possible. And I'm taking from viewpoint of so many economists and around us, and the great administrators around us, and take the advantage of these developments, and make a country. And again, we can see Sri Lanka is as a heaven for many people in the world. Thank you very much for giving me this wonderful opportunity. I thank the organizers.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. ప్రొఫెసర్ ప్రసాద్ రావు గారు సుమారుగా 1:15 సమయం పాటు శ్రీలంక ఆర్థిక సంక్షేమం పునరుద్ధరణ ప్రణాళిక అనేటువంటి అంశం పైన చాలా లోతైనటువంటి అసలు విశ్లేషణ చేయడం జరిగింది. వారు ప్రధానంగా శ్రీలంక అనేటువంటి దేశంలో లోపల 72% బుద్ధిజాన్ని పాటిస్తున్నారు. ఇంకా ఇతరములు వివిధ రకాల మతాలు ఉన్నాయని చెప్పుకుంటూనే అక్కడ ఉండేటువంటి ఒక ముఖ్యంగా ఆదాయ మార్గం లోపల మానవ అభివృద్ధి లోపల 0.782% ఉన్నట్టుగాను జనాభా 2,21,00,000 జనాభా ఉంది అని చెప్పేసి చెప్పుకుంటూనే వారు అనేక విషయాలు ప్రధానంగా చెప్పారు. వ్యవసాయ రంగంలో 15.67 జీడిపిలో సర్వీస్ సెక్టర్ లో ఉండగా వ్యవసాయ రంగంలో 3.86 మాత్రమే ఉన్నదనేటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా వారు చెప్తూనే ఆర్గానిక్ ఫార్మింగ్ ను వాళ్ళు ఇవాళ ఈ సంక్షోభానికి ప్రధాన కారణం కూడా అది అనేటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా చాలా స్పష్టంగా చెప్పారు. అదే విధంగా విదేశ అప్పులను కూడా వాళ్ళు పెద్ద ఎత్తున తీసుకున్నారు. దాన్ని కూడా తక్కువ చేసుకుంటే బాగుంటుంది అనేటువంటి విషయాన్ని తెలుస్తూనే వారి యొక్క ఎలక్షన్ టైం లోపల అనేకమైనటువంటి వాగ్దానాలు ప్రజలకు చేయడం జరిగింది. ముఖ్యంగా పన్నుల కోతను పెంచడం అనేటువంటిది ప్రధానంగా జరిగింది. ఇంకా కరోనా అనేటువంటిది కూడా మరొక ప్రధానమైనటువంటి కారణంగా ప్రొఫెసర్ ప్రసాద్ రావు గారు తెలియజేస్తూనే ఇవాళ శ్రీలంకలో ఉండేటువంటి ఒక 354 రూపాయలు ఒక డాలర్తో సమానంగా వాళ్ళు చెప్పడం అనేటువంటిది జరిగింది. అందుమూలాలనే ఇవాళ శ్రీలంకలో డీజిల్ రేట్లు కానీ, కిరాణం రేట్లు కానీ, ఆహార పదార్థాలు కానీ, బ్రెడ్ కానీ, కూరగాయలు కానీ, చికెన్ కానీ, మటన్ లాంటివి ఇలాంటి పదార్థాల రేట్లు అన్ని కూడా పెరిగినాయని చెప్పేసి ప్రొఫెసర్ ప్రసాద్ రావు గారు చాలా స్పష్టంగా చెప్పారు. అదే విధంగా ప్రధానంగా వ్యవసాయ రంగం లోపల కెమికల్ ఫర్టిలైజర్స్ అనేటువంటిది తగ్గించేసి ఆర్గానిక్ ఫార్మింగ్ అనేటువంటిది తీసుకురావడం అనేటువంటిది చెప్పడం అనేటువంటిది జరిగింది. అక్కడ విద్యుత్ కోతలు కూడా ఎక్కువ ఉన్నాయి. దానివల్ల పరిశ్రమలన్నీ మూతపడ్డాయి. ప్రధానంగా రష్యా ఉక్రెయిన్ మధ్య యుద్ధం కూడా ఈ యొక్క ధరల పెరుగుదలకు ఇంకో కారణంగా వారు చెప్తూనే పర్యాటక రంగం అనేటువంటిది బాగా తగ్గిపోయింది. అందువలన కూడా ఆర్థిక సంక్షోభం అనేటువంటిది పెరిగింది అనేటువంటిది, లాక్డౌన్స్ కూడా దాని మూలన కూడా ఆర్థిక సంక్షోభం అనేటువంటిది పెరిగింది అనేటువంటి విషయాన్ని ప్రొఫెసర్ రావు గారు చాలా స్పష్టంగా చెప్పుకుంటూనే దాని నివారణ చర్యలు ప్రధానంగా కెమికల్ యూజ్ చేయాలని, కెమికల్ ఫర్టిలైజర్స్ యూజ్ చేయాలనేటువంటిది, టూరిజం సెక్టర్ ను పెంచాలనేది, పన్నుల సంస్కరణలు తీసుకురావాలంటూ విదేశీ అప్పులను తగ్గించుకోవాలని, కఠినమైన నిర్ణయాల ద్వారా సబ్సిడీలను తగ్గించాలని చెప్పేసి చెప్పుకుంటూనే రాజకీయాల్లో మార్పులు రావాలని, ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థను మెరుగుపరచాలని ప్రొఫెసర్ ప్రసాద్ రావు గారు తెలియజేశారు. వారికి మా తెలంగాణ జనవేదిక తరఫున ప్రత్యేకమైనటువంటి ధన్యవాదాలు సార్. ఇప్పుడు మిత్రులు ఎవరైనా ప్రశ్నలు కానీ డౌట్స్ కానీ ఉంటే,
if anybody has any questions or any comments to be made, please raise your hands. I will unmute you.
A very good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Yeah, I'm Dr. K. Kishore from Women's College, Vellore, Tamil Nadu. I have a question regarding the Sri Lanka's crisis, which is related to his talk. My question is whether Sri Lanka did not address any issues on the unorganized sectors, like what we are failing now. Actually, there is, for example, the building systems, the proper building system from the unorganized sector, or the local vendors, or the seaside vendors, where you can see every year there are a huge number of black money which has been taken over by the government or the income tax department. Like that, I hope that Sri Lanka did not address this issue properly. What is to say on this, sir, on the unorganized sectors?
Sir, shall I?
yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. Definitely, it is a very important question you raised, sir. The unorganized sector is crucial for economic development, and majority they work in the unorganized sector, and proper way we are supposed to tackle this sector, then only economy will strengthen. Unfortunately, years together, we ignored this sector, and majority of the leftover without any safety nets, and their productivity levels are also not very encouraging, and that's why one important aspect is we are lagging behind in terms of economy when compared to rest of the world, with the developed nations or middle income group or high income group or low income group. There are differences. And if you strengthen these sectors, so these unorganized labor, working class, and their productivity levels and human capital is important. And that's why education, training, and particularly the human capital development, we have to invest. People talking about human development index, not developing other important aspects. And particularly human development is enlarging people's choices. And this majority of the people, this working class, unable to say, unable to uh, uh, have any choice, enlargement of people choices, and is encouraging the capabilities. Amateurs and others, they argue this is the only reason they're unable to improve their capabilities. Capabilities are responding. Education index and it's a health index. And governments are supposed to strengthen these sections, and they're supposed to spend much on health and education levels, and then only they can improve their income levels. And as a result, they increase they increase their what we call um, and the human development index. So Sri Lankan human development index is very high in the entire South Asian countries. So to some extent, the up to 19, they followed certain principles, certain rules and regulations, reforms. All these helped to sustain human development index at the higher level. But later on, it disappeared. So these developments are there, but you are rightly pointed out, and governments are supposed to spend in their budgets in the coming budget. So Sri Lankan government is supposed to propose this budget, and in their budget proposals, they will come up with as a encouraging in the case of what we call as a what unorganized sectors in the society.
Yeah. iPhone 13.
Sir, one question from my side. I'm Dr. Radhika from Andhra University.
Hello. Please introduce
Sir,
yourself.
now it is the time for
No, please introduce
our
yourself.
economy.
Ma'am, please introduce yourself, please.
This is Radhika, professor in the Department of Biochemistry, Andhra University.
Okay. Thank you. Good, madam. Good. Madam, you ask your question, ma'am.
So, is it Andhra Pradesh versus the economy of the Sri Lanka? In whatever the field we can compare, is it the right way to compare the economy of Andhra Pradesh versus the economy of Sri Lanka? It's a country, no, sir. Sri Lanka is a country. Andhra Pradesh is a state in one of the states in India. But could we compare like that?
Yes, madam, you are rightly pointed out, raised one pertinent question. Can we compare Andhra Pradesh with the Sri Lankan economy? And so we can compare with a similar with the similar characteristics. But without the similar characteristics, and even if you compare, doesn't give the proper responses. And for example, you can compare with China, because two countries are thickly populated countries, and one in rank in the first, and this India is ranked as second largest thickly populated country. You can compare those, but Andhra Pradesh is a state, and Sri Lanka is a country, and we can think about certain aspects of, but not say the country is like that. So economy is throughout the world. So what economics teaches in Andhra University, the same economics teaches in Oxford, Colombo, Britain, in Cambridge, and in anywhere in the world. So like that, you can think about it. Not exactly the people are supposed to think Andhra Pradesh economy. When you compare the Sri Lankan economy, it is not like that.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Sir, can you take three more questions? The three more questions.
Sir?
Three more questions are there. Can you take them?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Vasireddy Krishna Rao. Sridhar, I'll let you next.
Namaskaram andi.
Sridhar, next I'll let you.
సార్ సార్ ఒక్క ఆలోచన ఏంటంటే ఈ ఎకానమీ దెబ్బతింటానికి రాజపక్సే కుటుంబంలోంచి వచ్చినటువంటి లీడర్షిప్ ఉండటం, తర్వాత ఈ పొలిటికల్ నిర్ణయాలు సరిగా లేకపోవడమే కారణమని కొంతమంది కామెంట్. వాట్ డు యు సే?
That's absolutely right.
Okay. How it is influenced, sir?
How it is influencing? It influenced in many ways, because their economic policies, particularly the monetary policy and fiscal policy, and these are the two important policies decides the fate of any countries. So the growth has been diluted because of these policies, and the entire country in doldrums now because of these policies, and also the debt problem they're supposed to tackle properly, but they didn't tackle properly. That is another important thing. And also the policies related to agriculture. Agriculture is the mainstay, even if it is 8% contribution to the GDP, but the linkage effect is there. So look at the small country, and so when employment is supposed to generate, income is supposed to generate, but in these two sectors, income is not generated. It is because of the country's policies, economic policies. So economic activity, people are supposed to involve in economic activity, and we have to see the economic cycle is supposed to move faster, quick, by generating the supply chain and demand chain. Both the chains are supposed to intact. Otherwise, the economy collapse. This exactly happened in Sri Lanka, and their policies also influenced. As a result, people are suffering now.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Dr. Sridhar Raju is a social activist and a psychiatrist and a filmmaker. Sridhar, please go ahead.
గుడ్ ఈవినింగ్ ఎవ్రీవన్. ప్రసాద్ రావు గారు ఇది చాలా ల్యూసిడ్ గా చాలా వివరంగా చెప్పారు. అయితే ఇప్పుడు ఇండియన్ గవర్నమెంట్ తీసుకున్నటువంటి పాలసీ నిర్ణయాలు ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో వాటిలో ఈ గవర్నెన్స్ చేసే కంట్రోల్ ను స్లోగా కోల్పోతున్నదేమో అనేటువంటి సందేహం నాకు వస్తున్నది. దానికి నేను ముందు పెడుతున్నటువంటి విషయాల్లో ముఖ్యంగా ఇప్పుడు ఏ గవర్నమెంట్ ఉన్నా కానీ మన ఇండియన్స్ భారతీయులు చాలా సెల్ఫ్ సఫిషియెంట్ ఫుడ్ ప్రొడక్షన్ ఉన్నదనేటువంటిది మొదటి నుండి వ్యవసాయ ఆధారిత గ్రామ స్వరాజ్యం ఉన్నటువంటి భారతదేశము ఇప్పుడు ఈ ఆహార నిల్వలు ఆహార ప్రొడక్షన్ లోపట అగ్రికల్చరల్ ల్యాండ్ ప్రతి సంవత్సరము మోర్ దాన్ 2 లక్షల ఎకరాలు కోల్పోతున్నది. మళ్ళీ అగ్రికల్చర్ అంతా టెక్నాలజీ ఆర్ కెమికల్ బేస్డ్ అగ్రికల్చర్ ప్రొడక్షన్ పెరిగి న్యాచురల్ ఫార్మింగ్ అనేటువంటిది అంటే ప్రకృతి మీద ఆధారపడి పండేటువంటి పంటలు తగ్గిపోతున్నవి. మళ్ళీ చాలా ఎకానమీలో క్రూషియల్ అయినటువంటి బ్యాంకింగ్ వ్యవస్థ అంతా ప్రైవేట్ చేతిలోకి పోతున్నది. ఈ ఆర్బిఐ అనేటువంటిది బాగా బలహీన పడుతున్నది. ఈ ప్రైవేట్ శక్తుల యొక్క ఇన్ఫ్లుయెన్స్ మన ఎకానమీ మీద పెరుగుతున్నది అనేటువంటిది నా రెండవ విషయం. ఇంకోటి గవర్నమెంట్ చేతిలో ఉండాల్సినటువంటి వెపన్ ఇండస్ట్రీ ప్రైవేట్ వాళ్ళ చేతిలోకి పోవడం వల్ల గవర్నమెంట్ యొక్క కంట్రోల్ గవర్నెన్స్ మీద పోతుందా అనేటువంటిది ఈ మూడవ డౌట్ నాది. ఇంకోటి మనకు ఎప్పుడైనా గవర్నమెంట్ ఆర్థికంగా బలోపేతమై ఉండాల్సినటువంటి విషయంలో ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ విశాఖ పోర్టు కానీ ఇటువంటి చాలా ముఖ్యమైనటువంటి గవర్నమెంట్ ఆస్తులను పబ్లిక్ సెక్టార్ ఇండస్ట్రీస్ ను ప్రైవేట్ చేయడం వల్ల గవర్నమెంట్ తన యొక్క ఆర్థిక స్వతంత్రాన్ని ఆర్థిక స్వావలంబనను కోల్పోతుంది అనేటువంటిది నా 4వ విషయం సార్. ఇంకా ఇప్పుడు ఈ కంప్యూటరైజేషన్ వచ్చిన తర్వాత మళ్ళీ ప్రైవేట్ శక్తుల యొక్క బలం పెరిగిన తర్వాత ఇంతకుముందు మనం శ్రీలంక విషయంలో మాట్లాడుకున్నప్పుడు కూడా ఈ ఎలక్ట్రిసిటీ గురించి మాట్లాడుకున్నాం. ఈ ఎలక్ట్రిసిటీ ప్రొడక్షన్ అంతా ప్రైవేట్ చేతుల్లోకి పోతున్నది. ఇది చాలా ఎసెన్షియల్ కమాడిటీ, ఇప్పుడు ప్రతి మానవునికి అవసరమైనటువంటి విషయం. అదేవిధంగా డాక్యుమెంటేషన్ ఆఫీసులన్నీ ప్రభుత్వ ఆఫీసులన్నీ ప్రైవేటు శక్తుల చేతిలో కంప్యూటరైజ్ కాబడి ప్రైవేట్ శక్తుల చేతుల్లో ఈ పాస్వర్డ్స్ ఉండడం కానీ ఈ గవర్నమెంట్ మెటీరియల్ అంతా ఉండడం కానీ అది ల్యాండ్ వ్యవస్థ కానివ్వండి అది ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ కానివ్వండి ఏ విషయమైనా ప్రైవేట్ శక్తుల చేతికి గవర్నమెంట్ ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ కనుక కంట్రోల్ కనుక పోయినట్టయితే ఎలా ఉంటుంది అనేటువంటిది. ఇంకోటి ఈ ట్రాన్స్పోర్టేషన్ కు సంబంధించి కూడా ప్రైవేట్ శక్తుల చేతికే ఈ ట్రాన్స్పోర్టేషన్ పోవడం వల్ల రేపు ఏదైనా క్రైసిస్ క్రియేట్ అయినప్పుడు ఈ ప్రైవేట్ శక్తులు ఉదాహరణకు ఎందుకు నేను ఈ ప్రైవేట్ శక్తుల చేతికి పోవడానికి వరి అవుతున్నానంటే మొన్న మన మాస్క్ ను ఒక సింపుల్ మాస్క్ మనకు కోవిడ్ క్రైసిస్ లో కొనాలంటే 2 రూపాయలు పడేటువంటి మాస్క్ అది 20 రూపాయలకు 30 రూపాయలకు కొనుక్కున్న రోజులు మనం చూస్తున్నాం. ఒక ప్రొడక్షన్ కి 5 రూపాయలు అయినటువంటి ఒక ఇంజెక్షన్ బుడ్డి మనము 1,00,000 రూపాయలు పెట్టి కొనుక్కున్నాము, 60,000 పెట్టి 70,000 పెట్టి కొనుక్కోవాల్సిన అవసరం వచ్చింది. అంటే 20 రూపాయలు అయ్యేది 60 రూపాయలు 1,00,000 రూపాయలు పెట్టి కొనాల్సి వచ్చింది. అంటే వేలలో అంటే ఇది 200 టైమ్స్ 300 టైమ్స్ ఎక్కువ రేట్ పెట్టి కొనాల్సి వచ్చింది. సో ఇప్పుడు ఫార్మా ఇండస్ట్రీ ప్రైవేట్ చేతుల్లో ఉండడం వల్ల ఆ దుష్పరిణామం జరిగింది అనేటువంటిది, కామన్ మ్యాన్ ట్రీట్మెంట్ పొందలేకపోయింది అనేది నా ఆర్గ్యుమెంట్. ఈ విధంగా ఆహారము, బ్యాంకింగ్, వెపన్ ఇండస్ట్రీ, అదే విధంగా పబ్లిక్ సెక్టార్ వీక్ అయిపోవడము, ఈ ఎలక్ట్రిసిటీ, ఈ డాక్యుమెంటేషన్ కు సంబంధించి ఈ పబ్లిక్ అంటే గవర్నమెంట్ కీ ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ అంతా అంటే అది ఇప్పటికే మనకు ఈ ఫేస్బుక్లు ఇవన్నీ వచ్చాక, స్మార్ట్ ఫోన్ వచ్చాక ప్రైవసీ అనేది పోయింది, కాన్ఫిడెన్షియాలిటీ ఒక వ్యక్తి యొక్క ప్రైవసీ పోయింది. దీనివల్ల ఇంకా ఏంటిది ఇప్పుడు పబ్లిక్ మాస్ హిస్టీరియా లాగా లగ్జరీస్ మీద ఎక్కువ స్పెండ్ చేసి ప్రొడక్షన్ మీద తగ్గింది. స్మాల్ స్కేల్ పడి ఎసెన్షియల్ కామోడిటీస్ కు సంబంధించినటువంటి స్మాల్ స్కేల్ ఇండస్ట్రీలో పెట్టుబడులు తగ్గి పనిచేస్తున్నటువంటి మానవ వనరులు తగ్గి ఈ లగ్జరీస్ కు సంబంధించినటువంటి సామాన్లను, పనికి మాలిన విషయాలను ప్రొడక్షన్, ఎందుకంటే వాటికి బిజినెస్ ఎక్కువ ఉంటుంది కాబట్టి స్మాల్ స్కేల్ ఇండస్ట్రీ అంతా ఎసెన్షియల్ కమాడిటీస్ ను వదిలేసి నాన్ ఎసెన్షియల్ లగ్జరీ ఐటమ్స్ మీద ప్రొడక్షన్ కు ఎక్కువ సమయాన్ని కానీ ఆర్థిక వనరులను కానీ స్పెండ్ చేయడం వల్ల గవర్నమెంట్ వీక్ అయిపోతుంది అనేటువంటిది నా ఆర్గ్యుమెంట్. దీని గురించి ప్రసాదరావు గారు మీరు కామెంట్ చేస్తారని కోరుకుంటున్నాను. థ్యాంక్ యూ సార్.
నమస్కారం శ్రీధర్ గారు. మీరు మొత్తం ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థను అంతటినీ ఒక్కసారి చుట్టేసేసి ఈ విషయాలన్నిటినీ మాట్లాడండి అని చెప్తున్నారు. కానీ ఒక విషయం నేను చెప్పదలుచుకున్నాను ఏంటంటే
Sir.
గుడ్ గవర్నెన్స్ గురించి మీరు మాట్లాడారు.
అవును సార్.
Definitely, good governance is the key for economic development. Not only for economic development, any kind of development. Development is nothing but a good change. Good change, not only change, good change. It's a good change from ill-being to well-being. Say, development ki, under development ki, not development ki, మనం ఈ తేడాలు తెలుసుకోవాల్సిన అవసరం ఉంది, ప్రజలకు తెలియజెప్పాల్సిన అవసరం ఉంది. అంటే lack of freedom is a unfortunate thing that is related to good governance. Freedom ని ప్రొవైడ్ చేయాల్సినటువంటి బాధ్యత గవర్నెన్స్ లో ఉంది. ఎందుకంటే ఉన్నటువంటి సిచ్యుయేషన్ లో అనేకమైన విషయాలు మీరు ఎల్పిజి పాలసీస్ గురించి టచ్ చేశారు, భారతదేశం గురించి టచ్ చేశారు, తర్వాత బ్లాక్ మనీ గురించి టచ్ చేశారు. ఇవన్నీ ఎకనామిక్ ఇష్యూస్. అంటే ఒక్క మాటలో చెప్పాలంటే మీరు చెప్పిన దాంట్లో రిచ్ బికమ్ రిచర్, ద పూర్ బికమ్ పూరర్. అలాగే పబ్లిక్ సెక్టర్ అండర్టేకింగ్స్ ఉన్నాయి. వన్స్ అపాన్ ఎ టైమ్ పబ్లిక్ అండర్టేకింగ్స్ అంటే మనకు తెలిసిన ఇట్స్ హైట్స్ ఆఫ్ ది ఇండియన్ ఎకానమీ ఏంటంటే పబ్లిక్ సెక్టర్ ఎకానమీ. బట్ అన్ఫార్చునేట్ థింగ్ ఏంటంటే ఇట్ ఇస్ డైల్యూటింగ్. From time to time, it is going down, and as a result, in the public sector, private sector, public sector. But government and the public sector own public sector ne తగ్గించడం, పబ్లిక్ సెక్టర్ ని అణిచివేస్తున్నారా ఏంటంటే అది అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి. దాన్ని తగ్గించడం ఏ రూపేణ తగదు. పబ్లిక్ సెక్టార్ కి ఇంపార్టెన్స్ ఖచ్చితంగా ఇచ్చి తీరాల్సిందే. విశాఖపట్నంలో పబ్లిక్ సెక్టర్స్ ఎంత చక్కగా పనిచేస్తున్నాయండి. పబ్లిక్ సెక్టర్స్ లేకపోతే ప్రొడక్షన్ కి కాంపిటీషన్ ఎక్కడుంది? అంతా ప్రైవేటైజేషన్ చేసుకుంటూ వెళితే ఎల్పిజి పాలసీస్ లో ప్రైవేటైజేషన్ కొంతమంది బిలీవ్ ఏంటంటే ప్రైవేటైజేషన్ వలన మొత్తం అంటే ప్రైవేటైజేషన్ వలన ఏం జరుగుతుందంటే ప్రాఫిట్ మోటివ్ అంటే ప్రైవేట్ లాభాలే ముఖ్యమైనటువంటి. అంటే వాళ్ళు ఏం ఆర్గ్యూ చేస్తారంటే మేమంతా నీడ్స్ ఎవరెవరికి అవుతున్నాయో టైమ్లీగా ఇచ్చేస్తాం, వాళ్ళ అవసరాలని తక్షణం తీరుస్తాం, అవి చేస్తాం. కానీ ఇక్కడ చూడాల్సింది ఏంటంటే గవర్నమెంట్ అనేబుల్ టు టాకిల్ the whole economy, and it's unable to control the whole economy, administer the whole economy. అందువల్ల they wanted to take some help. ఆ హెల్ప్ లో మీరు చెప్పినట్టు ఎప్పుడైతే ప్రైవేటైజేషన్ కి వెళుతూ ఉన్నాం, ఒకటప్పుడు కంప్యూటరైజేషన్ is not helpful for the society అనుకున్నాం. కానీ కంప్యూటరైజేషన్ is doing better, but we have to take the advantage. People are supposed to illiterates ఉన్నారు. భారతదేశం is a home for illiterates. So parents are home for illiterates. ఇలాంటి సర్కమ్స్టాన్సెస్ లో మనం కంప్యూటరైజేషన్ ఇప్పుడు తీసుకుంటున్నాం. ది మోస్ట్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ థింగ్ అంటే ఐటీ సెక్టర్. we missed industrial revolution because of colonial rule, but we didn't miss agriculture revolution. Even today, pandemic situation లో 2 years పనుల్లో పాడుల్లో తిండి లేని పరిస్థితిలో మనకి సేవ్ చేసింది అగ్రికల్చర్ సెక్టర్. బట్ అన్ఫార్చునేట్ థింగ్ అంటే వి మిస్డ్ ఇండస్ట్రీ. దేర్ ఇస్ ఎ లాట్ ఆఫ్ టెక్నాలజీ గురించి మాట్లాడారు. ఇట్స్ ఏ 40-50 years of difference. When you look at
there are 2 or 3 questions, we'll answer them and come back to Sridhar.
These things are there. We'll discuss in detail some other time. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful question. It's a debatable question, and we have to think carefully these linkages. There is a lot of linkage effect among these important sectors.
There is an advocate from Telangana High Court. He has a question, please. I'll let you in another, after one more question, please. Please wait.
Sir,
Surendra,
sir, what?
Please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead. Surendranath sir, please go ahead, sir. You are Sir, unmute yourself.
Okay, sir. What was the role of China for the present crisis in Sri Lanka? And how India will help Sri Lanka to overcome the economic and political crisis? This is my question. I am Surendra, the advocate. Earlier, I worked in the government of India. Sir, I was also Andhra University student in post-graduation and law.
చాలా సంతోషం సురేంద్ర గారు సురేంద్రనాథ్ గారు
చెప్పండి సార్.
సురేంద్రనాథ్ గారు చాలా
Yes, yes,
సంతోషం అండి. చక్కటి క్వశ్చన్ వేశారు. మన రోలు చాలా ఎక్కువగా ఉందండి.
ఓకే.
బికాజ్ ఫైనాన్షియల్ గా మనం వీఆర్ సపోజ్ టు హెల్ప్ దెమ్ అండ్ పాలసీ మేకింగ్ లో పాలసీ గాడి తప్పింది శ్రీలంక. ఆ పాలసీ మేకింగ్ లో దాన్ని క్లారిఫై చేయాల్సినటువంటి ఇన్వాల్వ్ అయ్యి ఆ పాలసీని సక్రమైన పద్ధతిలో చేయాల్సినటువంటి పని వాళ్ళు అడుగుతారో లేదో మనకు తెలియదు. బట్ అట్ ద సేమ్ టైమ్ they're asking for our help. ఫ్యూయల్ ని ఇవ్వమని అంటున్నారు, వస్తువుల్ని నిత్యావసర సరుకుల్ని సప్లై చేయమని అడుగుతున్నారు, అదర్ ఆస్పెక్ట్స్ లో హెల్ప్ అడుగుతున్నారు. ఈ ఆస్పెక్ట్స్ అన్ని కూడా చేయాల్సిందే. అవసరం వస్తే మన ఎంటర్ప్రెన్యూర్స్ అక్కడికి వెళ్ళి అక్కడ ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేసి ఆ దేశానికి సక్రమైన పద్ధతిలో ఎకానమీని గాడి పడే విధంగా చేయటానికి ఎంతైనా మేలు చేయటానికి మన వాళ్ళు ముందుకు రావాలి. ఇప్పుడు వస్తున్నారు, అది చాలా సంతోషమైన పరిస్థితి. అలాగే మనం కొన్ని బయలాటరల్ రిలేషన్స్ లో కొన్ని ఇబ్బందులు ఉన్నాయి మనకి, శ్రీలంకకి కొన్ని సందర్భాల్లో ఇబ్బంది పడ్డాం. కానీ వాటన్నిటిని కూడా అధిగమించి ఈ రోజున శ్రీలంకకి హెల్ప్ చేయాల్సినటువంటి పరిస్థితి ఉంది. వాళ్ళు దయనైనటువంటి పరిస్థితిలో ఉన్నారు. దాన్ని మనం, ఎందుకంటే మన నైబరింగ్ కంట్రీ, మనం సార్క్ దేశాల్లో మన సభ్య దేశం ఉంది, ఒకప్పుడు బాగా ఉన్నటువంటి దేశం. నేను మీరు అడిగినట్టు 2015లో విజిటెడ్ శ్రీలంక. ఇంటర్నేషనల్ కాన్ఫరెన్స్ ఉంటే వెళ్ళాను. అక్కడ శ్రీలంక కొలంబోలో నాకు మంచి, బ్రిటన్లో చదువుకునేటప్పుడు నాకు ఉన్నటువంటి స్నేహితులను కలవటానికి వెళ్ళాను. వెళ్తే డిపార్ట్మెంట్ ఆఫ్ ఎకనామిక్స్ అలాగే వాళ్ళందరూ ఉన్నారు అక్కడ. వాళ్ళతో కాఫీ ఆఫర్ చేస్తే ప్రొఫెసర్ అమల గారు ఉన్నారు అక్కడ, అలాగే అమృతలింగం గారు ఉన్నారు. వీళ్ళందరూ కాఫీ తాగేటప్పుడు వాట్ ఇస్ ది గ్రేట్ అబౌట్ యువర్ కంట్రీ అని అడిగాను. దే సెడ్ వన్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ థింగ్, హార్డ్లీ యూ కెన్ సీ poverty, unemployment in this country, but whereas we can show poverty, unemployment in developed nations. That's what they told me. That's very proudly they said. That was happened in just 5-6 years back. But look at the country now. So can they say proudly now? It is the problem. So you have to, economy is very, very sensitive thing. If you don't tackle properly, it will overnight they become propers. It is possible in individual cases. They are also asking China's help also, and sometimes China is also offering, and they're having more friendly with China than with India. Now everybody is the same because they're in need of help. In such a way, everybody should help them to overcome these developments.
సార్ ఒక సప్లిమెంటరీ క్వశ్చన్.
చెప్పండి సార్.
భారతదేశమే తన ఆర్థిక పరిస్థితిని చక్కదిద్దుకోలేకపోతుంది, అనేక సమస్యలకి, క్రైసిస్ కి దారితీస్తుంది భారతదేశంలో. మరి ఈ భారతదేశం శ్రీలంకకి ఏ రకమైన మార్గదర్శకం చేయగలదు మీరు చెప్పండి.
Compared to Sri Lanka, Indian economy is a 3 trillion economy. It's a bigger economy. Compared to resources, India is a rich country. And that way, India is there are many problems. I'm not denying that. And we have to think and we have to discuss those problems in detail. But at the same time, whatever you have, so that is the quality of the human being. That is the greatest thing in the philosophy of Indians. And that's why from that angle, as from the humanitarian grounds, we're supposed to help even we're lagging behind in development.
సార్ ఇంకొకటి ఇప్పుడు ఈ సమస్యలకి చైనా కూడా కారణం అంటున్నారు, ఎకనామిక్ క్రైసిస్ కి. ఇది ఎంతవరకు నిజం?
అది వాళ్ళు చెప్పాలి. అది
వాళ్ళు ఒక పోర్టుని తీసుకున్నారు, పోర్టుని కూడా మెయింటైన్ చేయలేక చైనాకి అప్పచెప్పారు. 99 years అనేది ఒక క్వశ్చన్ ఉంది సార్ అక్కడ. ఇంకో మాట, ఫార్మర్ ప్రెసిడెంట్ చంద్రికా కుమార్ తుంగ ఒక సజెషన్ చేసింది, ఒక కమిటీని వేయాలా, ఆ కమిటీ మొత్తం స్టడీ చేసి గవర్నమెంట్ కి రికమెండ్ చేస్తుంది. అటువంటప్పుడు ఆ కమిటీ ఇచ్చిన రికమెండేషన్స్ ని గవర్నమెంట్ అమలు చేస్తే బాగుంటది. లైక్ మనకి కూడా ఒక క్రైసిస్ వచ్చింది ఒక కమిటీ లేకపోవడం వల్ల. అదేంటంటే రాత్రికి రాత్రి లాక్డౌన్ ప్రకటించడం ఒకటి, అలాగే పెద్ద నోట్లు రద్దు చేయటం ఒకటి, ఇలాంటి సమస్యలు ఒక కమిటీ లేకపోవటం వల్ల భారతదేశంలో వచ్చినాయి. అలా రాకుండా, అంటే ఏ రకమైన క్రైసిస్ రాకుండా ముందుగానే నివారించడానికి ఒక అడ్వైజరీ కమిటీ లాంటిది అవసరమని చంద్రికా కుమార్ తుంగ చెప్పింది సార్. నేను కూడా శ్రీలంక విజిట్ చేశాను 2-3 times.
మంచి పనే సార్. సార్ మీరు చెప్పింది అక్షరాల నిజం. ఇన్ రీసెంట్ COVID-19 క్రైసిస్ ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో, డ్యూ టు ది మాల్ అడ్మినిస్ట్రేషన్ and countries are unable to tackle the health crisis in their countries properly. That is one important thing. We all notice that may happen because with the limited less than 3 trillion economy, what we can do with a huge population, you tell me. Yes. It is very difficult. Yes. And we are unable to spend.
Sir, we will take another question. Selvi Ganesh, he's a newcomer, I think he's from Tamil Nadu, I don't know. Selvi Ganesh, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sir, my battery is
down. I know.
Yes, sir. Yeah, my question is, as sometimes ago you were talking about, can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So we were talking about unorganized economy, right? So as sir rightly pointed out, unorganized economy is the backbone of any economy, right? But if there is an attempt to make it or bring it under organized sector, okay, so now everything is digitalized and everybody has to make the payment through digital and everything will come under the organized sector, then what will happen to the backbone? There will not be any unorganized anymore once it is organized.
Doesn't matter. If you make them organized means you are making a backbone very stronger. That strongerness is essential for the economy, and with that stronger economy, the country can progress.
Then there will not be any unorganized economy at all, right? That will be wiped off. There will not be any unorganized economy at all.
We cannot say right now, but it will take time. And right now, overnight, we cannot.
I'm afraid we are very short of time. Please, one more question. Swati, go ahead.
Good evening, sir. Sir, I'm a doctoral candidate at Department of Climate Change at IWST Bangalore. Thank you for such a wonderful session. We had a lot to learn, and like the urgency of the situation in Sri Lanka right now is beyond doubt, and it needs a recovery plan to approach international lenders and bring about economic stability. And as you have mentioned that Sri Lanka will need a bridge loan while an external debt restructuring plan is put in place. But a lot also depends on whether there is a credible leadership. Sri Lanka is at a crossroads right now. What is the public unrest that will happen? How will the youth survive this crisis without suffering at large? And also another question is, what help can Sri Lanka receive other than the financial aid, considering it has invested quite a bit in its blue economy as well, but has not been able to exploit it, not exploit it, but use it at its best?
Madam, you are rightly pointed out one important thing. And Sri Lanka is at the crossroads now. There's no doubt about it. But the thing is, how efficiently the how quickly the government is able to manage this crisis with the help of other countries, neighboring countries, with the help of IMF, and with the, I believe the much more help should come from the people itself. The population is important. Their own population is important. And they're supposed to determine, and they're supposed to take involved decisions to take appropriate policy measures. How strong people are, country is able to make policy measures appropriately suitable for the situation, and then only we can say, and this country will soon come out of its situation. That is one thing. I didn't catch the second question you mentioned, ma'am. Madam, is it clear? The second question I didn't catch.
So, what are the other aids that Sri Lanka can receive from other countries, as except from the financial investment, credit of line? Like recently, Sri Lanka has invested quite a bit in its blue economy, but it has never been able to use ocean resources at its best. They at least have 40 to 60% of fishery waste every year. So how can they use it to the maximum efficiency to help them develop? And what are the other help in terms of natural resources that Sri Lanka get in order to stabilize their condition?
Ma'am, you are right. It's their strength is their water resources, and so I think they have already gained much from its resources, but still they have to explore whatever leftover resources are there, and they have to explore and make use of it properly, and bringing them into economy, and bringing them. Is there any linkage effect? And the country is supposed to look into it. If there is a linkage effect, and they can supposed to take the advantage for the development of other sectors. And the main other important sector is tourism. The main other important sector is tea and other important commodities. And so already they're taking maximum advantage. And still, if there are any leftovers, and the country is supposed to think about it and take the advantage of those important aspects, and involve them people in the economic activity, and their productivity levels also important. Then the economy will move faster and faster.
Thank you. One more question, last question. Venu Gatla, he was asking for some. Venu, please unmute yourself. Venu.
Yeah, namaste, Anna.
Namaste.
Yeah, namaste, sir. Thanks for this opportunity. I just had a random question with all your permission. I mean, is it possible to lead a sophisticated life from a common man to a nationwide? To lead a sophisticated life without debt or bank loans? Why? Because in the name of globalization in the recent decades, from common man to from the nationwide development, everyone are relying on bank loans and huge debts. This is leading to an economic burden. Due to this, I mean, like imbalanced political policies have been evolved, which is at the same time, in the same way, the same lifestyle is continuing to the in the common man also, where in order to develop, his lifestyle is being based on bank loans, home loans. This is what going on with huge pressures the lifestyle of a common man and the nations and the states are running, I feel. Hello. Hello.
Yeah. Wait.
So you got unmuted. So you need to unmute, sir. You got muted.
Yeah. Wait.
Yeah, I see.
I think there's a problem with this phone.
Professor, you need to unmute, sir.
Yeah. I'm
Okay. Yeah.
Sir, am I audible to you?
Yes, very much.
Charging is over. I'm unable to.
We'll try to wrap up.
Sir, any more questions?
Yeah, there was a question in between, but I'm afraid that you have lost. You did not hear the question. Anyway, I'll post that question to you, sir, and we can answer it directly. And Manoj.
Yeah, good evening all, and thank you very much, sir, for your beautiful presentation today. And munduga ma Guru garu Purushottam Rao gariki namaskaralu telupukuntu. And the Sri Lankan crisis, the economical crisis, this is actually what I personally feel is this is because of the populist schemes and all the rubbish whatever happened there, sir. And I don't think it will be so easy to get on back to work for Sri Lankan people. And I pray God that implication should not get over to the other parts of the world and to the people. I pray to God it should not come such sort of things, because what I feel is the old leadership was much quite better compared to the present leadership, sir, because the making the people lazy and getting habituated to the populist schemes, and for namesake and for time being it may be good, but for in future it will be a big loss to the country, sir, making the people lazy and getting such sort of benefits and all that. It should not get continued, and I pray God the people of Sri Lanka should regain and get well again. Thank you so much, Ramana, and thank you, Prasad Rao garu, and thank you, former VC Sudarshan Rao garu, for participating and giving us the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Very nice, sir. Thank you, Varna.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really a privilege listening to you.
Sir, Telangana Jana Vedika Zoom online meeting విచ్చేసి శ్రీలంక ఆర్థిక సంక్షోభం పునరుద్ధరణ ప్రణాళిక అనేటువంటి అంశం పైన ప్రొఫెసర్ ఎం ప్రసాద్ రావు గారు కీలక ఉపన్యాసం ఇచ్చారు. వారికి మా తెలంగాణ జనవేదిక తరఫున ప్రత్యేకమైనటువంటి ధన్యవాదాలు సార్. అదేవిధంగా ఈనాటి కార్యక్రమంలో పాల్గొన్నటువంటి మాజీ వైస్ ఛాన్సలర్ ప్రొఫెసర్ సుదర్శన్ గారికి, ఇతర ప్రొఫెసర్లకు, అనేక యూనివర్సిటీ నుండి వచ్చినటువంటి ప్రొఫెసర్లకు, వేదిక సభ్యులు, ముఖ్యంగా తమిళనాడు నుండి వచ్చినటువంటి సెల్వి గణేష్ గారికి మరియు సురేషన్ నాథ్ గారికి, అట్లాగే స్వాతి మిశ్రా అండ్ వేణుగోపాల్ అండ్ మనోజ్ రెడ్డి గారికి, ఇతర మిత్రులందరికీ పేరు పేరున మా యొక్క థ్యాంక్స్ తెలియజేసుకుంటూ ఈనాటి ఈ కార్యక్రమం ఇంతటితోనే ముగిస్తున్నాం. వచ్చే వారము మరొక అంశంతో కలుస్తామని తెలియజెప్పుకుంటూ అందరికీ మరొకసారి థ్యాంక్ యూ.